And so now we're going to go to talking about our mental health. During COVID, we were all stuck in the house, and we were, scared. A lot of people were scared of what was going on in the outside world, so it played a very it was detrimental to our mental health, not being able to see our families, not going out, not having gatherings and stuff, so we were really just stuck with ourselves and our own thoughts. And even kids, like not being able to go out and socialize, you know, um, with their peers, being stuck at home too. It was a detriment on their mental health as well. So we're going to go into the mental health aspect of COVID, and we have today for our roundtable one, we're going to have Dr. Green. Dr. Green, um, she graduated from UCLA with a BA in psychology, and she was called to be in the ministry. She continued her education and received a Master's of Arts in Biblical Counseling at Grace Graduate School of Theology and a Master's in Divinity at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. And she also recently received a Master's of Arts in Marriage Family Therapy at Alliant International University. She's also a teacher. She's a radio personality, and she's featured on the Bible Experience and a frequent guest on Let's Talk About It, the television show hosted by Dr. Minnie Claiborne on the Hosanna Broadcasting Network. So you should tune in if you haven't watched that yet. Okay, and she's a published author, she's a conference speaker, and a therapist, and also, most importantly, a pastor. So we would like to welcome Dr. Green to our show.
Hi, how are
Hi,
you
how are
today?
you? Good.
I'm so excited to be here today.
Yes, we're so excited to have you too. We
Thank
really
you.
are, to cover the mental aspects of, just our mental health is very important, and in some African American communities, we don't seek the help that we need for our mental health. So it's very important, to have this conversation and for people to seek that help. A lot of people, not even just in our community and other communities too, people think that, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything wrong with you to seek mental health. It's really a way of adjusting, coping, throughout your daily life.
Right, exactly. And
Yes.
so that's one reason why I'm so excited that Tercet is allowing us to have these discussions, especially for such a time as this. One of my goals is to help remove the stigma of
Yes.
mental health issues. And even when I was preparing to go back to school to receive that degree in mental health and as a marriage family therapist, I had no idea the capacity by which this profession is needed at
Yes.
this time. So I am so thankful that Tercet has decided to include mental health into the roundup on the show. So I'm so excited. I got some friends with me, some therapists that we're going to have a discussion about mental health.
Okay.
And so I'm excited.
All right, you guys take it away. We're excited to hear.
Okay.
Take
So
over.
basically, what I would like to do, I don't have a therapist. I don't see him yet, but
I can sit in. Just playing.
are you a therapist?
No, no.
Well, you're still invited to sit in.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, what I want to do is I first want to introduce the therapists that are with me today. There are actually two ladies that I have worked with before in the agency where I did my practicum and prepared for licensure. And we worked at a wonderful nonprofit agency, Palomar Family Counseling Service in San Diego. And so they're here with me. I have actually worked with these ladies on cases together, and it has been such a joy knowing them. So, what I'd like to do is I'm going to introduce them, and then I'm going to tell you the topic that they're going to be talking about, and we're just going to facilitate this discussion. Okay. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Grechell C. Hi, Grechell.
Hi, Wanda. Hi, Tercet. Hi, Cyndie. Nice to see you guys.
Okay, so Grechell is an associate marriage family therapist. She works with children in different age groups and neurodivergent populations. I'll let her explain what that is. She also works with adults and families dealing with trauma and other social emotional issues. Grechell is half Chinese and half Filipino, which is, I love it because Grechell and I have been able to have conversations also about just racial issues and things like that. And it's been very inspiring to speak to her even about that. She moved to America 7 years ago to become a therapist, follow her dream. She grew up in a Christian school, and that's where she found God in her life.
Okay.
And we need God in our life right now, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Mhm, the wonderful counselor. And so she is going to be speaking today about how trauma develops chronic pain. And as she talked about that, I thought about the scripture where Paul talks about, how God wants us sanctified, holy, spirit, soul, and body. And this shows the connection between mental health and our body situations, our pain, our trauma, and how it affects our body. So I think that's important information to know during this time. The next guest is Cyndie Claypool Deneve. And Cyndie is a author. She's a marriage family therapist. She is the author of a book called God's Confident Kids, Helping Your Children to Find True Purpose and Passion and Peace. She also is a co-author on four other books. Unshaken, Experience the Power and Peace of a Prayer Life, Unshaken Study Guide, Start with Praise, a 40-day devotional, and Raise Them Up, praying God's words over your children. So that also helps keep our mental health to cover our children in prayer right through here. She's a therapist and she works with children and adults, teens. She also is working on her doctorate degree in ministry and transformational leadership through Bethel Seminary. She's married and lives in Escondido with her husband, has two beautiful young adult children, and rambunctious rescue dogs.
That I do.
So Cyndie is going to be sharing with us about working with children and grief. She has some clients who have experienced death as a result of the COVID situation in their families. Some of their mothers, their parents have passed away due to COVID, and also grandparents. And I think it's imperative to have her speak on how we can help our children navigate through the mental health issues that come up with grief. And so I am really excited. And so we're going to start with Miss Grechell. So, Grechell, go ahead and share with us, please.
Hi, Wanda.
Hello.
So during this COVID time, a lot of us had to stay at home. We have to be isolated from one another and take away all the distractions or the responsibilities, or sometimes most of our coping skills away from us. Like going out, networking yourself, or connecting with people to as part of our healing, or exercise was even prevented, going to the gym and all those things. And what happens with that is we were left to our own devices. We were left with ourselves, right? And a lot of my clients I've noticed during that time started asking to go to therapy because they were experiencing a lot of psychosomatic symptoms. They were experiencing chronic pain, chronic migraines, and we were just wondering what's going on, what happened. And they just started reflecting about a lot of things that happened in their past that they can't avoid anymore. Now they have to face them and they have to reflect on it, and they had to go to therapy and able to manage that because these pains were sending them messages that, hey, something's wrong. You know, you need to focus on you now. And I've never focused on myself. That's what's going on in their lives at that time. And now they have to face that. And those chronic pain and those illnesses that they were developing was sending them messages to start dealing with mental health issues that they've experienced in the past, and that could be trauma.
So, Grechell, when you think about that, how many people do you think really understand that connection? Like even the people that are experiencing the chronic pain, do they come in understanding that that pain is part of trauma?
No, sometimes even simple things like depression and anxiety cause us to have what we call psychosomatic symptoms, chronic migraines that, or sometimes even a lot of cases are that are severe, like fibromyalgia and IBS. Um, like for example, for fibromyalgia and IBS, part of the treatment plan is going to therapy to mitigate or to lower down that stress because stress triggers the pain. When they go to therapy, they start recognizing these things where their triggers or their stress, and that's where they learn that okay, if I manage my mental health, I can manage my physical symptoms.
That is so valuable.
That is really interesting. That is because I would never have correlated the two, like, with migraines and just your mental health. That's really good. That's some good
Yeah.
information.
Especially, we are familiar with what we call cortisol, right? This is a stress response. It's a stress hormone. When this go up, it affects our immune system and it gives us physical messages to pay attention to. That's why when you go to therapy, part of the work is recognizing what your body tells you when you're anxious, when you're feeling depressed, or when you're when you're feeling simple things like stress and anything that can cause pain.
That is so great. Cyndie, you have anything you want to chime in on that topic?
Yeah, it was interesting. Just the other day, I was talking to a teenager who is feeling a lot of stress and anxiety. It's his senior year, and the manifestation of all of that is headaches. And so we can kind of see that with kids and adults and teenagers to be able to see how our mental health being out of sorts, being stressed or being depressed, how that's really impacting our physical bodies as well. And sometimes that's the first thing that people see, like, oh, I have a headache, and they don't realize that they're also feeling anxious and depressed and frustrated too.
Yeah, we should never separate the mind and the body.
Yeah.
It will always be one unit, one whole. And there's also the other side of the coin. For people who develop chronic illness or chronic pain already, or they've experienced cancer or they're still fighting cancer, they start developing anxiety and depression along the way, and that can cause a back and forth decline between your mental and physical health.
Yes. Oh my goodness. You know what? The time goes by so fast. We could keep talking about that topic, right?
Yeah.
So, yes. So at least we know now, people understand that connection. And so maybe that'll help somebody come and deal with that in therapy, to make that connection. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to Miss Cyndie, and she's going to be talking about our children who are grieving.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of kids. They've lost people due to COVID or due to something else, but because of COVID restrictions, they can't necessarily be there, or they weren't able to say goodbye. And so to be able to help our kids and ourselves through the grief process. And since this is a Christian network, I wanted to add in that sometimes Christians are the ones that will just say, it's okay, we'll see them in heaven. Or it's, kind of dismiss the emotions, and not just of the kids, of adults of our friends too, and just kind of almost like minimize the fact that, but I'm sad and I miss that person, or I'm really grieving, or I'm anxious that might happen to me too, because we're seeing a lot of that, especially in kids. That anxiety about COVID And I had a couple girls last year that I saw that were so anxious that their grandparents were going to get COVID because they lived with their grandparents. And so they wouldn't go outside and ride their bikes or do anything because they were so scared of bringing COVID home. And it was really hard to get them back to campus when schools opened back up because there was that anxiety over COVID. And so for working with kids and ourselves and adults is kind of the same principle, is to allow them to reflect on what they're actually feeling. And instead of just dismissing it or just going, oh, they're pretty quiet today, we'll just let them, sleep in, or, just hang out on their PlayStation or whatever it is. But to engage in those conversations, it's not going to happen overnight. Like if you haven't had that series of conversations, they're not going to automatically open up and tell you everything that's going on in their heart and their head. But to give them, I call it the language of emotion. You seem a little sad today, or you seem a little frustrated. Or to if it's something that you're grieving also as an adult, to let them see that. Say, I really miss my grandma today. Or I really, I'm really sad today. Or, and to allow them to come into that conversation. Because I've talked to a number of parents that will say, well, I'm trying not to cry in front of them. Cry in front of them. Let them see those emotions, because this is the time that they're learning what to do with these emotions. Exactly. And instead, a lot of times in an effort to try to protect our kids, we just kind of try to shove our own feelings, which then teaches our kids to shove their feelings. And we have to remember, like, if you read through the Psalms, David has an array of emotions. Yes. And he, God said that he was a man after God's own heart. And Jesus, he cried, he wept. I mean, he loved people, and he showed those emotions. Mm-hmm. And so to remember, if we want to be like Christ, that part of that is being able to engage our emotions and helping our kids be able to engage those emotions as well.
Yeah. Perfect. You know what? And I think it's also important for parents to understand that most mental illnesses do begin in childhood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we cannot forget about ACEs, right? Or ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience. And people or children who experience adverse childhood experience over time develop chronic pain and chronic illness.
That's true.
Study shows over time.
Yeah, and so for our parents to understand that is an opportunity for them to facilitate health and wholeness to their children. That's the only way we would learn about it. So many times parents would leave that out, and then the children grow up not knowing how to manage their emotions, not in touch with their emotions. And so we want to use our platform as therapists to develop emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And now people talk about wanting to be authentic. Yes. And in order to be authentic, we have to know what we're feeling so we can authentically express that. And it's not just helping our bodies, it's helping our relationships, and for our kids, their future jobs and how they are in the world, and being able to share God's love with other people, to be able to know what we're feeling when, so that we can be authentic.
Okay. All right. So all righty. So we're going to have Christopher come up in a little bit. I see here. So, okay, that's fine. Well, so is our time up?
No, you guys still have a little bit more time to go. That's just giving us a prompt to know what's coming up next for me. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I see. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. So just let me know, because I'm looking at my little watch here, trying to make sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. So what other things did you guys think that the people need to know about their own mental health, their bodies, or connection with their children?
I think one of the things, Juanda, you and I were talking about that too, about depression. And the importance to know the difference between that, like when we say, oh, I feel so depressed today, which is really sad or maybe defeated or frustrated, or feeling down, then the difference between being depressed, like clinically depressed.
Okay.
Because what happens sometimes is people feel numb, and so they don't actually say that they feel depressed, so they don't know they're depressed. But to watch for those signs, whether they're kids or your roommate or a loved one or someone, but they usually become unmotivated. They don't want to do, what they used to love to do. They're like, I just can't. They just can't get themselves out of bed. We were seeing that a lot with kids they couldn't even roll over our bed and turn on Zoom, and that effort that it took, like that black cloud to be able to get through that. And it was really hard for parents and their loved ones to understand that. And you can also see in their eating, like they're not eating as much or they're overeating, and you can see it in their behavior and their pattern.
And they're sleeping too much.
How do you like discern this? Because like I have grown kids now, but I have teenagers, and so I just felt like, they're going through their teenage phase, so I really didn't pay that much attention, like them spending less time with the family and being like, to themselves. I just always related to like, they're teenagers, they don't really want to spend time with us anymore, because your kids at a certain age where they don't want to have nothing to do with you. I mean, except mine is coming to eat dinner, but other than that, they would spend a lot of time in their room. So for me, it was kind of hard to discern, like, is this depression or is this just a teenage phase? What do parents look out for?
Yeah, that's 100% true. And because they are, starting to differentiate from the family and figure out who they are. And now there's social media. And so a lot of times they will be just on their phone scrolling through. And sometimes that's them actually connecting with other people. But then sometimes that's also an anxious feature, like kids that have anxiety. Adults do that too, is they'll just keep scrolling and trying to distract themselves from the feelings that are happening inside. So one of the things is just to try to keep that communication open. And once they hit the teen years, if you haven't established it when they're younger, it's really hard. So that's why you have to put in that hard work when they're little. But still, there's always time to start. But start small, because they're not going to, again, just open up and tell you everything. If you're concerned, you can say, hey, I'm kind of concerned that you're spending all that time in your room alone. If they get really angry and defensive about that, then maybe there's something there, and kind of back off. If they get emotionally dysregulated, kind of back off. That's not the time that you can put information in if they're feeling really angry. And then just keep slowly bringing that up a little bit. And, what friends are you hanging out with? And because if they're just in the room and not actually hanging out with friends, obviously it was different during COVID, which was super hard. But it's the sleeping in, it's the watch for their grades going down. That's a big clue right there.
You know what? Another thing, Cyndie, is that, especially in the young teenage boys, is irritability.
Yeah.
Girls kind of keep their depression inside, and you can kind of see in the depressed mood. But boys don't necessarily do that. They externalize their depression, and it comes up as angry and irritable. So I think that's an important cue for parents to recognize as well.
That's really good.
Yeah, especially with anxiety too, right? A lot of women and men, or boys and girls, get angry because the fact that they're upset that they can't control the situation, and it makes you upset. And if that tends to happen, you want to encourage that conversation of start with validation. Like, I understand it makes you angry that you didn't know that this was going to happen. And then just slowly start a conversation through validation. It always helps them feel like, you understand me, and I feel you understand me. I will draw myself closer to you.
Yeah, that's really
what I mean? Like that validation in itself, the being okay to be vulnerable around you is what helps teenagers connect more with their parents. I always tell parents that do not give them advice firsthand, because it's like what they hear, their interpretation is, you're telling me what to do. And I don't want you to tell me what to do, because when you push a teenager, they push you farther away, right? So you want to go about it in a different direction where you know, when they talk to you about something, oh, that makes sense. I understand why you felt that way. Simple validation like that, you don't have to say more. The more you plant seeds of validation, it will grow and it will say, okay, I'm safe here. She's a safe person to talk to. She's just not a parent that tells me what to do.
That's an excellent point. I've had a couple parents in family sessions. I've had probably a few parents that want to fix their kid. So they don't like seeing their kid sad, understandably, or anxious. And so they might make a joke, or they may just say, like, oh, don't be sad. And so the kid, what they're hearing is it's not okay to feel these feelings. And so what Grechel's saying is great, is that validation, to be able to validate them. Just, I hear that you're really sad. And I hear that you're frustrated. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
and I think a lot of it comes from, or it stems from, feeling afraid of feeling.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I don't want to feel this. This is too much for me. So you back off, and how you respond to your child will come off differently.
One of the things that we did in the agency that we work for, we see children, we get referrals from schools, we see the children, but one of the things that we try to encourage is that the parents would also be involved in their sessions sometimes, and a lot of times parents would drop them off at the agency, or we would see them in school, and then we have to chase the parent to come help with their children. But this is a collective situation where we all learn together, and parents are definitely in need of learning these skills to help their children. So so I love that collaborative part that we do.
And a lot of times we want to fix the situation, right? That's why we come to therapy. But what if we change that mindset to something kind of different? When parents participate in therapy with their child and they work collaboratively with the therapist and the child, we don't fix the situation. We see progress, we see growth. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, because a lot of, I'm sorry, Grechell, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I've seen a number of clients that the parents bring them to counseling for anger, but really, like Wanda was saying, is underneath that is usually depression or anxiety or PTSD. There's something else going on, but it can come out like a volcano. They keep trying to shove all these feelings in, and they just erupt. And I like to tell parents too, the reason why they may erupt at home, but at school they're like, oh, they're so nice and lovely, is because at home they feel safe, and they know their parents are going to continue to love them, and in those healthy families. And that's why in those healthy families you'll see that's where the kids will erupt. It's it's a cry for help, and to acknowledge, like, oh, you're feeling really angry. Encourage them to cool down. But because again, when they're feeling super angry and they're dysregulated, it's not the time to input information. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to hear if you're saying, stop yelling, I'm trying to watch the TV. Then they're not hearing any information that you put in their brain at that time. But to later go back and have that conversation to find out what those feelings are that they're feeling, and never ever throw those feelings back in their face. So that can happen, as adults when we're upset with our kids or whatever. Never throw those feelings up. You're just doing that because you're depressed, or you're sad, or you're frustrated, or you didn't get on, the softball team or whatever it is. Never throw that stuff back in your kid's face, because you want to be that safe place where they will come to.
Right. Very important.
Okay, ladies. Our time is up, but boy, oh my goodness.
Yes, thank you guys so much. Oh, we really appreciate it. This was very important. This is, to me, one of the most important topics that we're covering today, the mental health aspect, because it's overlooked sometimes, and this had a major impact on a lot of families during COVID,
Yes.
So it's really important for us to touch on these topics, and we are so thankful for you guys, and we appreciate all the information that you've given to us today.
Oh, well, thank you so
having me.
much for having us.
Of course. Anytime, ladies. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye bye.